We're going to talk about Z-spheres today. And I showed you some of this in the classroom, and I'm going to do it again now and see if you could follow along a little more easily. And then you could also always rewind this and watch it again. So I've started with just a sphere, and we'll call this the one layer. There's other layers here you can see. This is some multiple projects that I've been working on, but I just fired this up. So it's a regular sphere, and I'm just going to draw on it briefly so that we can just know which way is front and which way is back and all that. And I'm just going to give this character some sort of a nose and some sort of a chin. Now in the class I showed you folks how to make sure that your pen is programmed so that when I push the forward button, this comes up. By pushing this forward, the button on your stylus, it saves a lot of time having used the space bar. And then you can access the size of the brush and all this other stuff. There's so many different things. So it's very important. And then the back button for getting rid of things that you don't want to do, just for undoing things that you're not happy with. Okay, so once you start using all the keystrokes for ZBrush, it'll just make your workflow so much faster, and it will just speed the whole thing up. So what we're going to use in here is the Z-sphere, and you're going to find the Z-sphere in the append button right here. So here's your subtool folder that will be in over here. And if you open that up, you can see here's the different layers. This is the tool that I'm going to be using. I'm going to rename this and call it the head. It's really important to label all your layers, because you'll eventually have a lot of them, and it'll just easier to keep track of them. So now I'm going to go to the append folder, or the append button right here, and this subfolder pops open. And this is where I usually get a sphere, which I just did, and I'm going to delete that. I didn't mean to do that. So I'm going to go to append, and then you'll see all the things that you can import in. So this Pokemon ball looking thing right here is your Z-sphere. I'm going to pick that, and you'll see it appear here in your list. So you want to choose your Z-sphere. Now you'll see that the head that I was working on has gone dark, but you can't see where the Z-sphere is. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over here. It'll probably be in a different position. It'll probably be over here when you're going to be working with your main window. I'm going to hit transparent. And what I've done is any other layer besides the one I'm on has created as transparency, so I can see what's going on and where to move things. Now you'll notice that we've got edit, we've got draw. Underneath that we've got move, scale, and rotate. When you're on a Z-sphere, you'll need to choose these different buttons to do anything to the Z-sphere. If you just have it on draw, you'll be you'll make more and more spheres, more and more Z-spheres. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to hit the move button. But what you can also do is hit the W on your keyboard. So if I hit the letter Q, it's draw, W is move, E is scale, and then R is rotate. So I want to be able to dance between these when I'm using Z-spheres or anything else, and it'll make life easier. So I'm going to take my Z-sphere, and it's on the move, and I'm going to move it straight down. I'm going to try to keep it centered and keep it connected to the body. And I'm going to also move it back a little bit, because this is going to become the body. Now I want to make this Z-sphere a little bit larger, so I am going to hit E, and then I'm going to kind of touch inside this. You can see when I touch inside it and I start to draw it back, it's going to get larger and smaller. Depending on if you're here and you slide it this way, it gets larger. If you click off the model, you still move things, but you can move it in and out to make it larger and smaller. Okay, now I'm going to call that the chest, or maybe I'll make it a little bit lower. and I will make this the body, and then I'll make some other ones for the neck and all that. So I'm going to put it on draw, and I'm going to turn to the side. I could turn off transparent now because I can see where I'm working. And I'm going to draw a sphere right there. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to move that. I'm going to connect it to the head. You can see it starts to become this more organic shape. And then what I think I'm going to do is I'm going to draw another sphere below this by drawing from the center and pulling out. You can see if I keep it kind of close, it'll make a large ball, and you can see it's starting to shape like a body. I'm going to hit the move brush again, or the move button, and I'm going to start to stretch this out. So now you can see I'm starting to get the shape that I want. Now I can move this back and forth. I'm going to try to keep everything on center. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to now hit the X button, and the X button will allow me to do things in a symmetrical way. So I'm going to hit the draw button, and I'm going to draw 2 circles, one on each side, like this. Now if I were to start moving these, so I'm going to call those the shoulders. If I start moving these, if I move them out, you see that it's got this very thick base. This thick base is sometimes handy, sometimes it's not. I'm going to undo that move. I'm just going to move them a little bit. And I'm going to move them back a little bit. So I'm kind of creating the shoulders. And then what I'm going to do is I'd like to work on the arms. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw again right on top of this ball here. I'm going to zoom in a little bit so you can see what's going on. I'm going to draw right here and create a second ball. And now what that will allow me to do, and you might have to tweak this a couple of times, but when I go to move this, it will move individually. I can actually move the end of this, which will become some tubes that become the arms. But you can see what happened just there is when I started to move it, it moved this one and this one. Okay, so if I try again, you'll see that they highlight. This one is the one I want to move. I'm going to move in closer so you can see it. So this is the one I want to move, and everything goes for the ride. If I move this one, so I'm going to go off of here, make sure nothing is highlighted. I might even make my brush a little smaller, and I'll just choose this one. And then you'll see that starts to move. So you can go in there carefully and surgically move which Z-sphere you want. Now I can stretch this out as long as I want, but if I want to start to add some joints, like the elbows for this character, I'm going to go and draw where I want my elbow. So I'm just going to touch my cursor right to the center of where I want my elbow. Now if I go to move, I can move this elbow like so. I can move the wrist like this. I can still move the shoulders, and you can start to see I'm getting some of the proportions that I'm trying to plan. Now I want to move this down a little bit, give the character a little bit more of a neck, give them a little bit more of a torso, and now you can see, oh, it's starting to look actually like a character. Now, right now, these are just Z-spheres. So if I want to see what it's going to look like when it's a mesh, what I need to do is I need to press the letter A on your keyboard, and A turns it into a preview of the adaptive skin, A for adaptive skin, of what the skin will look like. You can kind of start to see what it's going to look like when you can sculpt on it. You can't sculpt on it right now because this is just a representation of what it'll look like. Now you can see it's very, very coarse. If I were to put the line work on it, it's dense, but it's got a lot of lines to it. Now what I can do to change that is I go down over here all the way to the bottom almost. It's adaptive skin, and you'll see that we're in preview mode. You can see the density is here. You can click on that button, and whenever you highlight a button or highlight a number in ZBrush, you can type in a different one and then hit enter, and now you can see that that went to a denser model. Okay, this is more of what you want when you're done. You'll have a mesh that you can really start to sculpt on, and it'll have the density that you want, and it's a little smoother, so it'll be less work to clean things up. Okay, but I'm not ready for that because I want to add some more information here. So I'm going to go back into the draw mode, and you can notice that I'm always snapping to different positions. Now you could use these arrows up here to snap the character in different directions, but you should also be able to move the character or move off the character. You move this cursor back and forth, and while you're moving it, then you touch the shift, it'll snap into place. Okay, so now that I've snapped to the lower part, I'm going to be on the draw button, and I'm going to just draw one more sphere. I'm going to start that again because it wasn't quite centered. There we go. I'm going to draw that. I'm going to move it over. Actually, I can't move it over yet because I want to now move it over. I'm going to snap to the front, and oh, I've got to turn off the. I have to turn off the symmetry if you want to move things to the center. And then I'm going to also make this larger because this is going to become the hip joint or the area around, the pelvic area. So just so you know, if you're going to be using the scale button, you could scale things larger and smaller. You're going to make sure you make any moves and go back to symmetry. You can make things larger, like I want this character to have kind of larger shoulders, and maybe I want these wrists to be smaller, so I'm going to put a taper in there. And then every once in a while I'll check to see what it looks like, to see if I'm starting to get what I want. Okay, now I'm going to put symmetry back on, and I'm going to draw a couple of orbs down here for the legs. Oops, I got to put symmetry. You got to keep on remembering going back and forth. Okay. It looked a little off for some reason, but I'm not sure why. I think it's because this is a little off center. All right, I'm going to go back to X, and I'm going to draw, and I'm going to try that again. It looks a little bit off, but we'll figure that out later on. Okay, I drew some of these in here, and you can see that it's a little bit off center, so I don't know if I like it, but it'll be fine for this demonstration. Okay, I'll turn that off, and then I'm going to draw another set of spheres, and those are going to become the legs. And then I'm going to go back to the move button, pressing W, and then I'm going to move the legs down all the way to where the feet are going to be. I'm going to go back to the draw button, which is letter Q, and I'm going to place where my knees are. And now I'm going to go back to W for moving, and I'm just going to move the knees out a little bit. When you're working with your character, start to think about the way the body is put together, like where the legs attach to the hips. Like these legs are kind of narrow, and normally they should be a little bit thicker, and they taper down to the knees. So I'm going to change the scale. I'm going to press the letter E, and I'm going to scale up these hip joints. And you can see now it's starting to look a little bit better. And then these ankles are kind of thick, so I'm going to make them a little thinner. And I'm starting to feel like I've got what I want. I'm probably going to add some feet. Let's check again the adaptive skin. So that's what you're going to start with. That's what you're going to look like when you start sculpting. If you wanted to add some more here to the backside, you can actually just add spheres if you want. They don't really need to be connected to anything. And you can still move them around. And then you'll notice that stippling kind of happens sometimes. That's when they're kind of crossing over onto each other. It's kind of breaking it a little bit. You'll see that suddenly it snaps like, hey, I don't really like where I am right now. So you have to be careful of that. But even if you have that kind of noise and you hit adaptive skin, you can see now that the character has cheeks. I think it's a little weird. I'm probably going to get rid of that and just add it in when I start sculpting. But I do want to add some feet. So I'm going to go down here and I'm going to draw a couple of the feet. I'm going to kind of do it from an angle so I can see where the feet are attached. I'm drawing that, and then I'm going to move them out. do that. So that looks like it's working pretty well. Okay, so let's say that I absolutely love this, and maybe I'd probably have a better head that I would work on, and spend a lot more time on this. But for this demo, we'll make it really quick. Okay, so make sure you're on this layer that says Zsphere, and then you hit the letter A, turn it to an adaptive skin. Now, what you do is you go back to the Append button, and then you'll see everything is here that you can append, but what's added to this is this thing called Zsphere 19. It's what you have, it's what you've been working on. If you bring this into your list like that, you'll see it suddenly appears here. Now the one that I'm on presently right now, this one is still the one that I can edit and move around, but I can't sculpt on it. But the one below it is the new one. This is the adaptive skin version that I can actually sculpt on. I'm going to turn off the Z-Sphere one, and then I'm going to name this the body, just so I can keep track of things. Now feel free to keep this, but this is what you're going to sculpt on, and you want to make sure that that's where you're at and you're on there, and that your symmetry is on. And then the other thing you're going to notice is when you turn on your wireframe, you'll see all the different poly groups that this character is made out of. You could sculpt on this, it won't really change anything, but if you want to unify all your poly groups so it's all one poly group, you can press the control button and W, and that's going to make it all one poly group, and then you'll be able to sculpt on. You can sculpt on it either way, but if you're looking for another way to change poly groups, you go to this main menu here, and you'll see something that says poly groups, and here it says there's all the different ones you can do. Let me just undo the one here so that the poly groups are different. So there's all the poly groups. So group visible is right here. And if I do that, you'll see all of it turns into one. Anytime you want to change that, you could just do Control W. Okay, so now this character can be sculpted on, and you can do whatever you want. But when you start sculpting on this character, don't try to do big, crazy, elaborate changes. Start with either your standard brush or your clay buildup, and start to build the musculature. Start building out some of the logical areas. And let me make sure that symmetry is on. So when you want to start building a character, think about the musculature, think about what it's going to look like, how is the character going to hold his body up, and all that sort of stuff. I might start with the move button and start to make some moves on the major portions of this character. And depending on the size of your brush, you can make major moves without doing any sculpting yet. What sculpting does is it changes the topography dramatically, and it gets a little sloppy, especially if you want to make large decisions. But what I can start to do is I can start to pull and grab and make this character look a little bit more the way I want it to. Like these legs are obviously very spindly. This character by no means is proportioned by human scale. It's very character-like. The decisions you make about what the character looks like and what the proportions are going to tell you a lot about the character itself. But you can see that I can make some major moves and things like that without changing the topography too much. You can see this is a pretty dense character, and it doesn't need to be that dense to start with. The denser the character when you're starting with it, the more time it takes to render and all that. But now you can go to clay buildup and you can start building up some of the musculature. This character needs a stomach, needs some thicker muscles for the legs. And then remember, whenever you start to do stuff like this, you can always hold down the Shift key and smooth this out. Now, because this character is relatively dense, the smoothing process might take a few tries. The more dense the character is, the harder it is to kind of smooth things out. What I will often do is I will turn on Dynamesh, which can be found here in geometry, there's Dynamesh right here. You can see this particular number is at 256. I'm going to put that to 128 and then re-Dynamesh by holding down the control key off of the character, pull and drag. Now you'll see that the density of the character still looks pretty much the same, but when you go back to smoothing the character out, you'll see it happens very quickly. You don't need to make the character very high in resolution or very dense to start with, because you're making decisions about the character's proportions, look, shape, and all that. You're not adding detail. You don't need to add a lot of resolution until you're getting into the detail phase of doing your character. At low res, when you start to do the detail, you can see it cuts in there very nicely, but if you start to zoom in, it's a little on the crusty side. So what I can do now is, once I'm happy with everything and I like where it's going and I like what it's looking like and I've got the shape, I've basically built the foundation of the character. Now you can move forward and start making decisions about detail and texture. So imagine that right now we're just building the foundation of a house, and when you start doing details and figuring out costumes and all that, that comes later on, so that you don't have to make a lot of changes afterwards. So you want to really think the character through, think about all of the proportions and all of what the character's body looks like before you start adding on the details, which is like picking out the curtains once you've completed your house. Okay, so that is how you use the Zspheres. And this is only one way to build bodies. I'm going to talk about another way to do that in class next week. You can decide what you like, which one is easier for you, but we'll talk about that next week. And thanks for your time. Talk to you later.